Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Well, you know, we've talked a lot about millennials, and are they interested in doing things for other people? Well, the good news is yes, of course. And today our guest is going to give us some good news and ways that perhaps even you can get involved. Joanne Otte is with us. She's a program director for Wheat Ridge, and we're going to have her explain what she does and how millennials are doing just that. Hi, Joanne. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Where are we Skyping you in from? Where are you?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago, Illinois. Good. Well, nice to see you. Tell us about Wheat Ridge. What is it?
So Wheat Ridge Ministries' mission is Lutheran seeding ministries of health and hope in the name of the healing Christ. And we do that primarily through grants. We have 3 grant programs, one of which is designed specifically for young adults. But we also do that through other convenings and resources. We have webinars as well. So we are helping to provide resources and support for people who are starting new ministries. Wow,
good for you. All right, so how are you getting young people involved? And I understand they're pretty innovative, like yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, so our Burst Project Grant Program is specifically designed for young adults ages 20 to 35 who are starting new health and human care programs. So when we think about health and human care, we think about it pretty broadly. So that could be working with refugees and immigrants. It could be working in an after-school program. It could be working with ex-offenders. It could be a wide variety of things. And so the grants that we made just recently, we made 12 Burst grants just recently. And they really kind of run the gamut. We have some that are working with we have a new program that's a social enterprise. Michael Alden is doing a social enterprise where people who've come to the United States as refugees are learning skills, then to be able to become interpreters in the healthcare field. So it's providing them job skills and opportunities in this new country, and is also helping other people who are coming as refugees as well when they're coming to hospitals and other healthcare providers and need to speak with those people for important services. That's one example. But we've connected with people in a lot of different ways.
So the Burst Project grant goes to an individual, and that helps them to initiate their calling or their specific ministry.
So the grant dollars technically have to go to a nonprofit. So this one with Michael Alden and the Refugee Interpreter Services is going to Accentria, which is in New England. And Michael is the young adult who is running the program. So the Burst Project grants are both project-based and person-focused. So part of it is on the project and what people are trying to accomplish, and that's where the $5,000 goes towards helping them start up that new project. But we also have a strong professional development component in the sense that we have a convening each year for all of our young adult grantees to bring them together to share resources with each other and do networking, and we build our convening around their interests and needs in terms of professional development. So the workshops and all of the things we discuss are the things that they say they're most interested in learning and growing in. But we also do other things in terms of professional development and connecting people with opportunities like mentors, and even in our application stage of the grant process, we understand that young adults may not necessarily be grant writers or have written grants before, and so there's a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to do revisions and really talking through with young adults what we're looking for in a grant application and how they can improve it and make it more competitive.
Well, you got some really interesting organizations helping our people excel, sharpening your financial skills, sports night, wellness on Wheels program, etc. How do you raise the funds for the grants? Where does the money come from?
So Wheat Ridge Ministries is an interesting organization. We do have an endowment, but we also raise about 70% of the money that we use for programs each year, which is somewhat unusual in terms of typical foundations. So in that sense, we're not a typical foundation. We aren't only using the money from the endowment, the interest from the endowment, we're also raising 70% of the money that we give away each year.
Great.
So that money comes from congregations and individuals and, a variety of sources.
Oh, should they go to wheatridge.org to apply for a grant?
Yeah, so you can go to wheatridge.org, and if you click on grants, then you can see our 3 different grant programs, one of which is the Burst Project grants that I've been describing. And then all of the application materials are online there.
Some of these names are pretty interesting. What's Sports Night with Liz?
Yeah, so that's with the Hartville Migrant Ministry. And so this is in an area of Ohio where there have been a lot of migrant workers who come here each year. And the children of the migrant workers, and this is connected with some Lutheran churches, but also other Christian ministries who wanted to support the people when the migrant families are there. And so the sports night is about giving an opportunity for exercise and fitness for the kids. I think like in a lot of places in our country, kids are obese and don't have enough opportunity for exercise and running around. And so it's basically it's a camp where they are learning skills around sports, but also just having an opportunity for play and interaction. And they also do a Bible study as a reflection, Bible reflection as part of that as well.
All right, let's take a look at a couple other ones. Caitlin McKinley, she got a Quiet Lounge for older adults with dementia. Wow.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So this is in a community where many people are struggling with dementia, and people have learned through research and over time that there are a lot of different ways of interacting with folks with dementia that can help them to be engaged and to be more, interactive. So folks who maybe would have just been sitting in a chair and not participating in activities, they created this, Caitlin has created this Quiet Lounge. And so basically it's a cart that has a lot of different tools on it. So it could be an iPod where the person can listen to music. They have puzzles. There's some aromatherapy types of things. So it's all these different options for people who typically haven't been engaged in kind of the group activities to help them to connect with themselves and with other people.
You know, it looks to me, Joanne, that part of Wheat Ridge connection is not only can they come to you for a grant for what they do, or at least apply, but you can connect them with other people who have received a grant in areas that they may feel led to be involved in.
Yeah, certainly. That's one of the things that's great about Wheat Ridge as a whole. I think a lot of what we do is not just giving people a grant or providing financial assistance, but is making those really important connections across sectors and across nonprofits and across ministries. I was having a phone call with a grantee recently, and we were talking about refugee services, and I was saying, you're an organization in Georgia doing something very similar to an organization in Ohio, and I'd love to be able to connect the two of you so you can talk more about the outcomes of your project and how to improve things for the refugees that you're serving. So that's true across our grant programs, but I think especially with the young adult ones, it's nice because we bring them together in person for the convening each year as well, so they can build relationships in person over that 2.5 days and stay in contact with each other.
You primarily seek out ministries and outreaches that primarily are led by millennials?
For the Burst grant, yes, they have to be, the person who is running the program has to be between the ages of 20 to 35.
Okay, all right.
To be eligible. Mm-hmm.
How's the response been?
Well, it's been, we've done some things this year that have really increased our proposals and applications. So we had a partnership with Lutheran Services in America, which is a larger organization that serves many Lutheran social service types of organizations all across the country. And so our partnership with Lutheran Services in America brought us many more applications this year so that people knew about our burst grants. That's one of the things that we want to encourage is we would love to get more applications. We'd love to be in touch with more young adults who are doing really interesting and innovative health and human care work in their community. And so we'd encourage you, I mean, this is a great opportunity as well for people to know about our burst grant program. But we traditionally kind of spread the word through congregations, through our own constituents, through other partners that we have. And so that's the primary way that we've gotten the word out. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for this opportunity as well. So far, the program is very new in the sense that it's only been around for about 3 years. And previous to this year, we had made a total of about 17 grants. And then this year, we made 13 in total.
That's exciting. All right, so wheatridge.org. That's the main place to connect with you, wheatridge.org, right?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thanks, Joanne. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, welcome back. Unfortunately, we were unable to get Lori connected today, but we'll get her connected soon and bring you that update of what's happening with the anti-Semitic movement across the United States and around the world. Earlier, Paulina had a chance to talk to Melissa Kruger, and she wrote a very interesting book called Walking with God Through Motherhood. And interesting time together as Paulina and Melissa discuss this. Let's join them in that conversation.
Well, first of all, Melissa, happy Mother's Day and congratulations on your new book. And I'm talking about Walking with God in the Season of Motherhood, new released book. And first of all, Melissa, I want to start by asking you to kind of briefly explain to us how unique is this book? Is it a parental manual? Is it a Bible study? Is it a devotional? Tell us about it.
Well, you know, it's a little bit of all of those things combined. When I was a new mom about 14 years ago, I could find a lot of parenting books and I could find a lot of Bible studies. But the one thing I struggled to find was something that intersected the two. And so that's what I've hoped to have done with this study, is to have merged Bible study, really digging into God's Word, with the goal of application being toward the season of motherhood. So that's my intent and hope, is that it's not 10 steps to be the best mom, but it's more, how do we engage with and walk with the Lord during this special season of motherhood? How do we find refreshment or encouragement from Him as we are pouring out into the lives of our children?
So what are some of the key issues that you covered in your book?
Well, a few of them. One huge thing to cover is, what is my entire purpose in life, and especially as a mother? I have to know what my macro purpose is before I can try to help my children discover their purpose. So we start out at the very beginning in some sense. What am I made for? What am I here for? And then we just journey through, how do I become a woman who loves to be in God's Word? How do I become a woman who prays well for my children? How do I become a woman who really prioritizes? There are so many good things to do in our day and age. How do I prioritize what to do as a mom now? And then we move into really studying who God is and how that affects us as a mother. So seeing God as loving and kind and good, then we start to emulate those characteristics in our motherhood. So it's kind of looking at our lives broadly and applying that to the season of motherhood.
I know that one of the things that you suggest in your book is to for mothers to spend time with God and to every day, go into the Word and, just spend time alone with God. It almost seems impossible, especially for you, the mom of 3 children. How do you do that? And what's your suggestions to all the busy moms out there?
Yes, I think it's one of the most difficult things in our day and age with so many just things coming at us, and even our portable electronic devices with us at all times. And so I really tried to formulate this book to be something that moms could take on the go with them wherever they go. All of the verses that you look up in the study are actually included in the book. So God's word essentially can go with you while you're waiting in carpool line or while you're waiting at swim lessons or whatever you may be doing in your day. My hope was to make it as accessible as possible for that very reason, because I think moms today are as busy as they've ever been. And I think it's really hard, even when we do get time in the word, to even know where to begin. It's a big book, so it could be confusing to know do I just open up to Leviticus and start reading there, or where do we go? And so what I've tried to do is apportion little bits for each day so that a mom can get in God's word without being overwhelmed by it, and hopefully just encourage her to be listening to God and be praying back to God, to encourage this relationship with the Lord as we are walking with our children, to be walking with God ourselves. So that's my hope.
Melissa, I have a lot of friends who are mothers, and I know they're wonderful women, they're Christian, they love the Lord, they love their children, and yet I see that, they snap, they get angry, they lose their cool. And what is it? Is it, like you mentioned, all the distractions we have? Is it, are we angry with ourselves? And I don't know if that happened to you, if you ever lose your temper with your children. But how do you explain it, and how do you combat it?
I was gonna ask my house this morning when you asked that question. I think every mom I know loses her cool at some point in the mothering process, because children can be amazingly frustrating. They can be amazingly needy. They tell us exactly what they want at every moment, and they really demand more of us than most of us have ever dealt with in our entire lives. And yet we love them deeply. So here we're in this situation where we have this role that we believe is so important. And yet, for me as a mom, I found myself failing in different ways every day. And I think that's just the reality of our brokenness. Every one of us struggles with sin, even as we become Christians and even as we're walking with the Lord, we still struggle to live in the truth that we know. And so what I think the only method for real transformation is to be transformed by the Word. And so as it comes into our lives and as we learn about God, somehow He changes us. It's kind of like my roommate and I lived together all 4 years. And by the end of 4 years, we started talking like each other and looking like each other. We dressed alike. Our hair was the same. And I think the same is true of time spent with the Lord. The more time we spend with Him, the more we start to look like Him in our parenting. So if I want to be a kind mom, it's not going to work really well for me just to work really, really, really hard at it and try to make myself different than who I am. But as I spend time with the Lord and experience His kindness to me, that's going to change me from the inside out. And so He's going to bear the fruit of patience and kindness in me as I abide in Him. And so I think it's this wonderful thing that just by spending time with the Lord, He promises to change us. All of us who spend time with Him will leave that time different. And that's an encouragement.
That's a wonderful advice. In your book, Walking with God in the Season of Motherhood, you describe for readers PMS, not the way we know it, the perfect mom syndrome. Can you talk about some of the symptoms and how do we correct that?
Yes, I see 2 major symptoms. One symptom is despair. When we fail, we feel utterly despairing that we have not been good enough. The other, actually on the other side of the coin, can really be a sense of judgmentalness. When we do well and when we think, hey, I'm good in this particular area as a mother, I think we can become very judgmental in our mothering. So we might vacillate on the same day multiple times between judging other mothers and saying if they just did it this way, it'd be so much easier, to finding ourselves despairing because we're not being the mothers that we hoped that we'd be. And so I found myself on this pendulum swing between, oh, I'm such a failure, to why is she doing it that way? And I really think the only solution for us is to become gracious women. And that is towards ourselves and towards others in our lives. And that's really rooted in believing that whatever we have has been given to us. So if I happen to parent in some area easily, that's just a gift of the Lord. That's his work in my heart by his Spirit. And if I'm struggling in a certain area of motherhood, I can trust that Jesus and his payment on my behalf is enough, that I don't have to work to be the perfect mom because Jesus has been perfect for me and he is going to change me. It may take a long time, but he is promised to transform me. And so we can trust in that. But I think the symptoms are mainly both the judgment and the despair. And I think the word that we all need to hear is grace, that we have been given unmerited favor and we can hope to live in that rather than living in this constant comparison with other women.
Let's talk about obedience a little. You have a chapter called Ordering Your Home, and you talk about submission, and it's hard for a lot of women, and yet you personally feel it's very important to submission is important. Can you explain why, and how does that reflect the example of Jesus?
Well, I think truthfully, all Christians in some way are called to submit. So it's definitely not just a woman or male thing, but the Lord has put different authorities in each of our lives. And when it comes down to the family unit, he has said that the husband's the head of the family and that he should lead lovingly and joyfully, and that the wife should follow his leadership. And so I think sometimes we can start to think, does that mean the wife is less than the husband? And I think the clear answer of Scripture is by no means. They've just been given different roles within the family unit, much as if you look in the Army, there are different roles within different, so to speak, levels. There are generals, and then there are just regularly commissioned officers in the Army. And so we have different ranks at times and different people who are in charge. But by no means does it mean a woman is lesser than her husband. They're of equal value before the Lord, but they just have different roles. And I like to really compare that to the relationship of the Trinity. We have God the Father, we have God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. They've each been given different roles in the Trinity of what they do, but each is God. So they're each very significant. And Jesus himself, he submitted to the Father, and he submitted to the point of death in following the Father. And so really, if I want to know what it looks like to be a wife who submits, I look to Jesus. If I want to know what it looks like to be a husband who leads well, he also looks to Jesus, and he sees how Jesus gave himself up for his love of the church. So the leadership of men should be self-sacrificial and loving, and then the submission of a wife should be trusting and loving as well. So there's really this mutual love between partners that is a beautiful reflection of Christ and his church.
That's a beautiful analogy. Thank you, Melissa. I really enjoyed our time together. We're almost out of time. And so towards the end, I want to ask you, can you, if you were to speak directly right now to that anxious and stressed mother, what would be the one thing you can tell her to encourage her?
I think I would say just how you love and care for your child and love them so deeply. The Father loves you with an even greater love. And so when you are stressed or worried, you can call out to him, just like your children when they need help and can't tie their shoes and they say, help, mommy, and you love and delight to help them. Our Father loves to help us. And so we can run to him with our problems. I think we spend a lot of our time kind of like a toddler saying, I can do it myself. And God invites us to rely on him. And so my encouragement in our stressed and anxious lives would be to spend time in prayer before him, asking for his help, saying, "Help, Daddy, help, Daddy." I think he is ready to give us the help we need if we would just seek it from him.
Thank you, Melissa. I love the way you explain things. If you want to know more of what Melissa has to say about obedience, submission, walking with God, and getting in His Word, get hold of her book, Walking with God in the Season of Motherhood by Melissa Kruger. And today I'm very delighted to have you with us. Happy Mother's Day.
You also. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Melissa.
It's a great resource. Check it out. Well, listen, we are all waiting with great anticipation, if not anxiety, as to what the Supreme Court's going to decide as it relates to marriage. Well, coming up next, we're going to be talking to the judicial analysis from Focus on the Family to find out how we're going to handle this. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. What a delight to have with us today Bruce Hausknecht. He is the Focus on the Family judicial analysis. And like all of us, we're waiting to see what the Supreme Court is going to decide. And we're not sure when this decision is going to be released. Could be any day now, or it could be as late as next Tuesday. Bruce, nice to see you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Perry. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for all what you guys do that Focus on the Family. It's a partnership that we cherish to work with you guys. All right. You know, I am surprised how many people aren't even aware that this is about ready to come out. Explain the case to those who may be hearing this for the first time.
Well, of course, we know that same-sex marriage has been around since 2003 when Massachusetts, when their top court mandated that state start licensing and performing same-sex marriages. And since then, we've had 31 states pass marriage protection amendments in their own state constitutions to try to salvage and safeguard one man, one woman marriage. But now the federal courts have gotten involved since 2013 when the Supreme Court handed down the Windsor decision, which struck down the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which defined marriage at the federal level as one man and one woman. So since 2013, we've had these federal courts striking down all these state marriage amendments so that now we have 36 states that have either been ordered by a court to recognize them or did it legislatively. And actually, of those 36 states, more than 2/3 were ordered by federal or state courts to start performing them. So that brings us to the 4 states that are before the Supreme Court right now. Their marriage amendments were challenged: Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee. But their marriage amendments were upheld by a federal appeals court last year. So the gay activists involved in those suits appealed to the Supreme Court. They heard it. They heard arguments in late April. And now we're waiting to see the answer to 2 questions. One, does the Constitution, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, require same-sex marriages across the land? And the second question, does the 14th Amendment require states to recognize out-of-state same-sex marriages performed elsewhere, like in Massachusetts, where it's legal? So those are the 2 questions, and we're waiting, as you said, any day now. Could be Thursday, could be Friday, Monday, or Tuesday. It's just hard to tell with the Supreme Court. They don't really tell you when they're going to issue decisions. But so we count the tea leaves, we count the number of opinions that are left to be issued, and so it looks like it could be this week or early next.
Boy, there's so much here. Back to the states just for a moment. There are a lot of those states who were forced by the courts to go ahead and recognize same-sex marriages, even though the will of the people was not to recognize same-sex marriages. Can those ever be challenged again?
Well, I'm afraid not. If the Supreme Court upholds those federal court decisions, what we're dealing with is a basic issue of civics that we all learned in high school or maybe even elementary school, and that is that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and it trumps even state constitutions that are contrary to the federal Constitution. So, if the justices decide that the 14th Amendment requires same-sex marriage, that would trump a state marriage amendment that says marriage can only be between one man and one woman. So it's an issue of the supreme law of the land versus states' rights, and that is how we got to the Supreme Court.
Bruce, I know you and others monitored the arguments as they were being presented there to the justices. How did you feel the arguments went?
Well, you can never tell very much from oral arguments. I've been in those kinds of appellate courtrooms myself, and judges feel the obligation to attack both sides of the argument. So you might think that the judge is asking you a friendly question, but then he can turn around and ask you a very hostile question. And it was the same way during the oral arguments. There weren't very many surprises. I think some people looked at some of the things said and said, hopefully, that maybe Justice Kennedy really is more concerned about states' rights than he is about forcing same-sex marriage upon all 50 states. So there was some of that discussion afterwards, but you really should not get too emotionally involved one way or the other with what the Supreme Court says during oral argument.
All right, let's take a look at this. There's a couple things now being looked at. One is that two of the justices are being challenged as to whether or not they should be taken off the case and their opinions not considered because they have performed same-sex marriages. Ginsburg and what's the other one?
Well, it's either Kagan or Sotomayor. Probably.
Yeah, Kagan, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you think that's challengeable? Can that be looked at?
No. Here's the thing. The ethics rules that apply to Supreme Court justices are really self-applied. There is no higher tribunal that can judge them on whether they must recuse themselves or not. They don't have a judicial board of ethics that can discipline them. Really, the only check and balance in the Constitution that's left if judges are guilty of misconduct is impeachment. And that's a drastic remedy that I don't think we're going to see in this case, even though many of us have been complaining about Justice Ginsburg's both her participation in these same-sex marriages and the statements she's made on the record to media lately about how America is going to be very willing to accept same-sex marriages. So while it's problematic, it's again something that I don't think we're going to see any kind of resolution of one way or the other.
All right, let's jump forward. Let's say the Supreme Court decides to recognize same-sex marriages. What's that going to do to the faith community?
Well, let's start with churches and pastors, because that's where most people will see it. You're going to see what we're already seeing now in many states that have protections for lesbians and gays. You're seeing people charged with discrimination. There are plenty of cases, whether it's the Kleins, the bakers from Gresham, Oregon, or Barronelle Stutzman, the florist in Washington State, or there's a baker here in Denver, Colorado, that was found guilty. You've got wedding photographers in New Mexico. You have wedding venues all over in places like New York and Iowa and Vermont have all been brought before human rights commissions and charged with discrimination. Now, if same-sex marriage becomes the law of the land, those laws are going to get even more widespread, and we're going to see double, triple the amount of cases brought against Christian people like that. Now, churches fit into this mix because they can become what is called a public accommodation if they hold out their facilities to the public to perform weddings or to host groups like Alcoholics Anonymous in the fellowship hall on Monday nights or something like that. If they hold their facilities out to the community. Guess what? LGBT groups are going to demand the same type of access, and if they are not provided that same access, these churches and their pastors could be hauled into before these civil rights commissions under the same types of charges. That's the first area of concern. Parents should know that in some of these states where we already have same-sex marriage, their parental rights to guide their children's education have been severely usurped and damaged by the state. As far back as 2004 in Massachusetts, after they started same-sex marriage, there were parents there who were forced to watch as their children from kindergarten, first grade, second grade on were taught about homosexual marriage. And they took it as far as the federal appeals court and lost, and were told in no uncertain terms that since same-sex marriage was the law in Massachusetts, that the school districts could teach anything they wanted to about that, and the parents had no opt-out rights or had no rights at all vis-a-vis the public schools. And their only solution, their only choice left to them was to homeschool or private school. So parental rights, you have churches that are going to look at public facilities questions. Those are the two main that are going to hit the average Christian in the pews on a day-to-day basis.
All right, a couple of things come out of that. What about Christian schools, and what about us broadcasters? I mean, hello, it's coming at us like a freight train.
Well, yes. Let's talk about Christian schools. Private Christian schools, whether they're elementary or high school or even private colleges, all seek and need accreditation. And if they seek accreditation from some of these secular agencies, some of those secular agencies are imposing their own requirements of non-discrimination. Perfect example is a Christian college in Massachusetts. Gordon College was questioned by its accrediting agency earlier last year about their stance on marriage. Gordon College got in the news because the president had signed a letter asking the president not to discriminate against Christian organizations seeking contracts and grants with the federal government. Very innocuous, typical religious freedom thing, yet it raised such a groundswell of opposition to this Christian college that their accrediting agency got involved and said, let's look at your overall policy towards gays and lesbians. And they were able to keep their accreditation, but this is going to be an issue. And the other issue is whether those schools are going to keep their tax-exempt status, because in the new reality of same-sex marriage, are schools that adhere to the biblical definition of marriage going to be deemed not worthy of a tax-exempt status? So, schools are in jeopardy. Now, and broadcasters, religious freedom has already taken a hit in many areas with same-sex marriage. Canada and the United Kingdom come to mind immediately. They have strict regulations about what you can say and cannot say on the air or in print or on the internet. And they've been prosecuted. Ministries, organizations, people have been prosecuted in those countries for hate speech merely for quoting Bible verses. You're going to see more and more of that type of thing in the United States if same-sex marriage becomes the law in all 50 states.
It's interesting because of the net neutrality bill on the internet, that's already moved the internet over into the utility category, which basically means coming next will be content control, where all of this argument fits in. Bruce, let's talk about the flip side of this. Well, let's say the Supreme Court upholds traditional marriage. I can't imagine the church or the Christian community or the faith community is off the hook.
No. And for the reason I stated earlier, see, Christians are already coming under attack in states with these public accommodations ordinances and other laws that give special status protection to sexual orientation. Those are going to continue. The Kleins in Oregon and the Barronelle Stutzman in Washington, those people are still going to face persecution. Those are going to come up in other states. But if the court was to find that there is no constitutional right to same-sex marriage, that would give at least Christians a fighting chance to at least keep their free speech rights and their religious freedom rights intact long enough to make an impact in the culture and try to turn this ship around.
If they go the other way and they do approve same-sex marriages, does that open Pandora's box for polygamy and every other aberration?
Oh, absolutely. Because if the man-woman requirement for marriage is meaningless and it's all about who you love, which has been the argument all along, even up to and including the Supreme Court, if that's the definition, then the heterosexual component of marriage really can't stand logically. So it's going to be group marriage, polygamy, and types of marriages we haven't even dreamed of yet, unfortunately, because marriage has always been about uniting the two halves of humanity, male and female, not gay and straight. And it's for the benefit of children created by the two sexes. Once we open it up to everybody else, then marriage ceases to have any real meaning, and Christians are going to have to work extra hard in the culture to restore a culture of marriage.
Okay, it appears that we just don't know which way the court's going to go. I've heard some of the arguments, and some think it's going to uphold, some think it's going to collapse. What is your advice to the faith community? I've always said that we go through three stages. We go through shock and awe, then we go through anger and blame. Unfortunately, too many of us stay there. And then the next stage is we take on personal responsibility. What's your advice to the faith community if in fact the federal government's going to recognize same-sex marriages?
Yeah, skip the first reaction. Stay calm and realize that this is not a surprise to God. It's in His eternal plan. He knows how it all works out. We're just instruments in His hand. And we need to be winsome and not feed the fires of our opponents who claim that we're hateful bigots. I think we need to see reactions like we saw among the faith community in Charleston, South Carolina recently to the tragic murders down there where white and black churches got together and really united over the issue of race. We need to see that from the Christian community over the issue of marriage. We need to be teaching our children what the value of marriage really is and what it's about so that we can reclaim that culture, sort of like we're doing in the pro-life movement right now with the millennials and the younger generation who are beginning to understand the value of life. I think we can do that with marriage, but we need to act as our Creator would like us to, which is to be winsome, know the facts, be able to talk and defend your beliefs in a way that is not antagonistic and is indeed a winsome reflection of the witness that Jesus Christ would have us be.
Beautifully said, Bruce. The irony of all of this is when you pull back the onion skin, so to speak, of this argument, I've heard it as low as 1%, as high as 2.5%. of our population is changing the definition of marriage. Is that true?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the unfortunate thing is they are so dominant in the news. Anything having to do with sexual orientation is such a dominant news item that I saw a poll recently that said the average American thinks that gays make up about 23% of the American population, when the Center for Disease Control, which has a more detailed survey, found that 1.6% of Americans actually identify as gay or lesbians. And then a smaller percentage also identifies as bisexual. So it's a very small percentage of Americans. And yes, they are indeed changing the face of American law and the institution of marriage.
Do you see a collaboration within the faith community to defend the traditional marriage, no matter which way the Supreme Court goes? I mean, this would be something that would cross denominational lines, would bring other faith organizations together. Do you see some kind of a collaboration?
Yes. I think that's inevitable, and it's a good thing. we can definitely unite around marriage, no matter what our theological differences are on things like infant baptism or things like that. But yes, we should have Christians uniting with Muslims, Jews, and Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons. It doesn't matter. Those faith communities can all unite around marriage and become a force to be reckoned with, essentially, in our culture, if only we will count our strengths and add them up so that we're all fighting together instead of being a million separate little voices in the wilderness.
Well, here we go. I guess we'll wait and see what happens. We are, I don't know, we're all standing by. What was surprised to me, Bruce, is how many Christians were unaware that it had reached Supreme Court level. And your phone's probably ringing off the hook now. Ours is too. People just didn't realize it snuck up to that level.
Right. And a lot of people are too busy to pay attention to politics, and they don't even watch the evening news until it actually impacts them. Well, this is actually going to impact everyone in the pews, from parental rights to tax exemptions for churches. Once people understand how serious this is going to be, they're going to get involved. The question is whether it'll be and whether there'll be anything left to sort of rally around, or whether the battle will be lost. Hopefully, we will get in line and get united behind God's definition of marriage and turn this culture around.
I got less than a minute. Do you think ultimately we could go back to the compromise being the civil union, where at least you keep marriage, definition of marriage intact, but you created another category?
That's a possibility. You know, there's always a way to provide for people's needs, whether they're heterosexual or homosexual, with regard to legal issues like inheritance and adoptions and things like that. There are ways to provide for that without changing the definition of marriage. And I think people need to recognize that. All
right. Bruce, thank you. And thank you again to your entire team there at Focus. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, you can go to FOTF.org. That's focusonthefamily.org. And Bruce and his team and everybody there do a great job. Thank you, Bruce. Keep up the good work, friend. And let's talk on the other side of this, okay?
All right. Thanks, Perry.
All right. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market. But at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.